It's March of 2008. This is Dr. Ava Berryman and Dr. Robert Langford, two researchers for the SCP Foundation, which is a secret international organization that contains and studies thousands of anomalies and anomalous entities that exist in our world. Berryman and Langford are currently conducting research at Foundation Site Romero 5 on something called Project Hydra, in which they are using the Mandelbrot set to find and extract visual cognitohazards. Given that the SCP Foundation has thousands of files that could potentially cause an apocalypse if known about to the general public or rival groups of interest, they have employed the use of cognitohazards to protect the secrecy of certain files. A cognitohazard, by definition, is just a concept or a piece of information that triggers a harmful psychological or physiological reaction, just by being perceived or understood by an individual. The easiest way the Foundation employs this is through the use of cognitohazard images, which are embedded in thousands of top-secret files. So, when an individual who doesn't have the proper clearance tries to access a certain file, a picture, the cognitohazard, pops up on the screen, and when the person observes and processes it, they are psychologically or physiologically affected, usually by death. But there's one issue with cognitohazards. Every human is subjective and might not process or understand a certain image in the same way. Sure, there are cognitohazard images with a high affection rate, but not a 100% affection rate, specifically due to this universal subjective viewing. In 2007, Dr. Berryman attempted to solve this problem of subjective viewing by investigating the human brain's processing of angles and lines, which occurs at the most primitive area of the visual cortex, called the striate cortex. She found that the one thing that is universally objective between all human perception is angles and lines. And what has more angles and lines than an infinite recursive pattern, known as a fractal? This is the Mandelbrot set, which is a recursive polynomial equation given by z sub n plus 1 equals z sub n squared plus c, where z and c are complex numbers. This equation creates an infinite unique pattern that fits within a finite area. However, what Dr. Berryman discovered is that certain regions of the Mandelbrot set can function as visual cognitohazards, due to the brain's processing of the recursive angles and lines within a picture of the set, along with certain concepts or ideas that these angles and lines evoke. And since these cognitohazards are solely angles and lines, they are free from subjectiveness when viewing, and thus affect everyone the same. Dr. Berryman then started something called Project Hydra, in which she and her team would find regions within the Mandelbrot set that produce visual cognitohazards, known as Fractal cognitohazardous imagery, abbreviated as FCI. FCIs are classified into 3 levels. Third-order FCIs influence neurotransmitters in order to produce subliminal effects and compel behavior. Second-order FCIs, known as deleterious, induce physical effects such as nausea, seizures, and unconsciousness. First-order FCIs trigger intracranial aneurysms leading to immediate death. For example, this third-order FCI induces a mild sense of anxiety regarding an upcoming personal event or task that the viewer has neglected. The main aim of Project Hydra was to produce universal and unavoidable cognitohazards to be used for protection of Foundation files and assets. Berryman recruited Dr. Robert Langford to the project shortly after. Berryman and Langford have been attempting to find FCIs within the Mandelbrot set for a few months now, with almost no luck due to the complexity of the set, along with their methods. They are using a Monte Carlo method, in which they pick a random data point within the set and test the resulting image for cognitohazardous effects. Given the fact that the Mandelbrot set is infinite, they have had little luck in finding FCIs. However, Dr. Langford had recently developed an algorithm that applied a Hessian approximating approach based on machine learning techniques he had been familiar with before transferring to Project Hydra, but it yielded very little increase in finding FCIs. At this point, Berryman's team was producing around 4 FCIs per week, none of which had been first order. In order to successfully interpret if a fractal image is an FCI without potentially risking death of Project Hydra's own personnel, all images, whether hazardous or not, are sent heavily encrypted from Site Romero 5 to Site 15, in which dozens of D-Class personnel attached to brain scanners view the FCIs, and the resulting effects are noted. In July of 2008, Site 15 reported that Site Romero 5 had produced a lethal first-order FCI. 15 D-Class personnel within the Site 15 FCI testing center were exposed to this FCI, and all of them were susceptible to the fatal effects. Despite the success, Project Hydra was not yet complete, as Site Romero 5 could not yet continuously or reliably produce any kind of FCIs, let alone first order specifically, due to their limited methods of extracting fractal images, that be by randomly selecting points. All FCIs produced thus far have been the result of a mix of Langford's Hessian approximating algorithm and pure guesswork. After just over 2 years of effort, in March of 2010, Dr. Langford successfully derived the underlying formulas to produce FCIs after studying fMRI brain scan data, essentially turning the human visual system into a solvable math problem. This formula was similar to the Mandelbrot set's underlying formula, but with a few extra variables. In his formula, f of z sub n is a function that mathematically expresses the human visual system. Think of the human eye and brain as an abstract equation where f of x equals y. X is the image matrix, the raw visual input hitting the cone and rod cells in your eye. F is a function expressing the brain's internal biological processing of such image. And Y is the final output, which is how the brain interprets and responds to what it sees. Because the Foundation could now quantify the human brain, they could mathematically define exactly what they wanted the output, Y, to be. Say you want to induce nausea. The brain's response to produce a feeling of nausea is quantified, and that target condition becomes your Y value. With this formula, the team behind Project Hydra was able to input their desired neurological effect, which is that type of feeling the FCI would induce, and then using the algorithm, they can find a fractal image that induces such desired effect. This formula was named the Berryman-Langford set, and was immediately locked in an ultra-secure enclave within Site Romero 5's data store, with access only provided to Dr. Berryman, Dr. Langford, and Site Director Samantha Hughes. Through the Berryman-Langford set, the rate of generated fractal outputs possessing cognitohazardous properties increased from 0.004% to over 80%. Dr. Berryman suspected that the rate was actually closer to 100%, with a discrepancy caused by cognitohazardous effects that the detection methods at the Site-15 facility were unable to classify, such as immeasurably minuscule effects, or effects targeting non-quantifiable parts of the mind. Project Hydra was now considered complete. For the next 4 years, Site Romero 5, under the management of Berryman and Langford, submitted an average of 60 useful FCIs per week for Foundation security usage, with up to 10 being first order. In November of 2014, 058, one of the 13 overseers of the SCP Foundation, visited Site Romero 5 and requested a meeting with Berryman, Langford, and Site Director Samantha Hughes to debrief them on a highly classified endeavor. Project Nietzsche 058 revealed that all the FCIs produced by Site Romero 5 did not have any effect on one demographic: reality benders. When you hear the term reality bender, it's easy to picture an all-powerful entity warping space and time, but within the Foundation, it is a broad, often mundane classification. It ranges from dangerous high-profile anomalies down to perfectly ordinary citizens who live their entire lives without ever realizing they possess a reality-bending trait. Their powers might be something as simple as slightly shifting probability. In fact, this passive trait is so common that a significant number of the D-Class personnel used in the FCI testing facility at Site-15 were actually reality benders themselves, entirely unaware of their own nature. Because their abilities were so unknown and hidden, they blended right in with the regular population until they observed the FCIs and didn't feel any effects. 058 confessed that the Foundation had been actively hiding these survival logs from Berryman and Langford for years. It was established earlier that fractal cognitohazards affect all humans the same, so therefore reality-bending humans are biologically different in some sort of way. Project Nietzsche would be overseen by 058 and had the main aim of producing a cognitohazard that has successful effects in reality benders. 058 instructed Langford to provide an update on Project Nietzsche's progress every year in the form of annual schedule alignment meetings. In the 2018 Project Nietzsche schedule alignment meeting, an incident which would later be designated as Incident 9001-1 occurred. The meeting started off normally, with Langford explaining that progress has been slow due to the lack of data on reality benders. Note that in the crowd was Dr. Ackerman, a known lower-level reality bender. Langford starts to explain that they have been doing research on a specific region of the Berryman-Langford set that they believe will be somewhat effective on reality benders. He says that on the next slide he has included a very weak second-order FCI from this region, which should elicit a very mild feeling of cold to everyone in the audience, including any reality benders. As he flips to the next slide, the entire audience, except for Dr. Ackerman, collapses. It turns out, somehow, the second order FCI had been replaced with a fatal first order one, which resulted in the entire audience, except for Dr. Ackerman, to be terminated, including site director Samantha Hughes. Note that Dr. Ava Berryman was not present at this year's meeting. The day following Incident 9001-1, Dr. Langford was summoned for debriefing by 058. In their meeting, Langford explained that Dr. Berryman was the only person who had access to Langford's terminal, but certainly she didn't inject the lethal cognitohazard into the presentation, right? Langford took the blame himself, saying he must have accidentally swapped the correct FCI for a lethal first order one, somehow. But he didn't understand how he could have possibly done that, because then he himself would be dead as well. Immediately following this meeting, Langford was placed on administrative leave, and never returned to Site Romero 5. The Berryman-Langford set was reclassified as SCP-9001, and all new security measures were implemented as its containment procedures. Production of cognitohazardous material would continue at Site Romero 5, with Dr. Berryman overtaking Samantha Hughes' position as site director. Romero 5 was further classified as a dark site, and its sole purpose was to contain SCP-9001. All remote communications between Romero 5 and other Foundation sites from then on were forbidden, with the exception of quarterly FCI packages to be sent from Romero 5 to other Foundation sites to be used for security purposes. On August 22, 2025, Protected Site 7 received its quarterly FCI package from Site Romero 5. During routine validation of its contents, Waldor.aic, a Foundation AI that scans FCIs and validates them based on their effects, broke from protocol and initiated the deletion process on all newly received files. This is the FCI that Waldor scanned, and its according interpretation of it. Waldor would not respond to questioning regarding its decision-making and unauthorized destruction of Foundation data. The only further thing Waldor repeatedly requested was its own termination. Following a conference with the O5 Council to explain the false alarm, Record-Keeping and Information Security Administration Director Mariah Jones was authorized to open a line of communication to Dr. Berryman's team to inform them of the FCI mishandling and request a resubmission of their quarterly findings. There would be no response to this from Site Romero 5. Satellite imagery of the site grounds would later reveal the presence of additional facilities and building extensions that were neither authorized nor accounted for. A few months later, Foundation Agent Saunders was deployed by vehicle to Site Romero 5 to investigate due to her high cognitive resistance to cognitohazardous imagery. The site had been radio silent with the exception of quarterly FCI packages, even in the presence of O5 Council members requesting communications. Upon reaching perimeter of the site, Saunders observed that the local environment was completely altered. Wildlife had mutated into geometric horrors, such as deers with 6 legs and recursive antlers. The main site structure had contorted into a growing spiral complex, eerily similar to a fractal. Saunders was attacked by a humanoid entity with multiple arms and mismatched features, and her body cam video log revealed that upon being injured by the entity, she herself started to grow and mutate recursively into a fractalized biological mass. The footage then went dark. Following the sharing of Agent Saunders' body cam video logs reports of Site Romero 5 to the rest of the Foundation, Site Romero 5 was designated as SCP-9001-A. 058 put together a joint task force to properly investigate the abandoned facility, which included Dr. Langford, forcefully dragging him out of retirement, specifically due to his expertise and closeness with the now rogue Dr. Berryman. Upon entering the facility with a few hiccups, they found that Romero 5's data storage center had been converted into a biological network. Server racks were transformed into human trunks rooted in mycelium networks, and the walls of the facility displayed geometric patterns and had turned into a sort of pulmonary network, almost breathing. At one point, one of the portable reality anchors the team had overloaded, and one of the agents, Sebastian, was dragged by a biological mass into a non-Euclidean hallway, where his entire body was reduced to a single coordinate in space. Upon further exploring the facility, searching for Dr. Berryman, they entered a massive panopticon room that held a subject named Perseus, who was a low-level reality bender. The facility, or entity, then trapped Dr. Langford's mind in a simulated hallucination of Berryman's old office. Having fully morphed into the anomaly herself, Berryman begged Langford to help her finish the mathematical equations for FCIs that were effective on reality benders, but he refused and broke free from the illusion. Dr. Berryman had used Perseus, along with dozens of living heads of reality-bending individuals, to repeatedly test FCIs on and figure out if they were successfully affecting a reality bender. However, when you use a fractal cognitohazard to scramble the mind of a reality bender, it turns out that you start to scramble reality itself, which is what led to the corruption of Site Romero 5. After the team activated the reality anchors, which flattened Berryman's physical body into 2 dimensions and then out of existence, they put subject Perseus out of his misery and called an orbital strike on Site Romero 5 to fully neutralize it. Following this, Dr. Langford was placed under psychiatric care after he said that every time he looked at a complex fractal pattern, he heard nothing but screaming.